Firefighters of Reddit. What's the dumbest person you had to save in a stupid situation? Dumbest tried to cross a raging river in 0-degree weather about a 300-foot span on a snowmobile. He lived but didn't make the crossing and the machine was recovered days later. I'm not a firefighter, but I used to do a lot of disaster response work. Hurricane Floyd, Eastern NC. I had a farmer with a large family that refused to evacuate his house. Stubborn bastard. River had broke loose, floodwaters were coming up fast, and the police had given up on changing his mind. I drove my truck right up into his yard, rolled down the window and asked him to dress his kids in something orange or bright yellow. He asked me why and I said so body recovery will be able to distinguish them from all the dead pigs floating around. He told me to F off, but 5 minutes later he had the whole family in the vehicle and they got the hell out. We needed to close the main connection through a forest over the winter because the trees were falling faster on the road than we could remove them due to way too much snow falling. Also the redirection was more than an hour longer due to the snow. Some cars thought that they would come through but turned around as soon as they saw the trees on the road. One semi also thought he'd get through. He drove up to the trees and called the fire brigade and complained why we didn't remove the trees. As he was calling, a bunch of trees behind him also fell, locking him in. It stood there 1 month before the trees and the snow could get removed by us that at least the semi can back out. We needed another month until the road was free again. Where the F do you live? Because I'm pretty sure nature is telling you all to leave. I once had a firefighter tell me he almost died in a house fire while going back into the house to look for the owner. A neighbor was concerned about why the firefighter was still in the residence, so he asked another firefighter. This is about how the exchange went. Neighbor: why is that fireman still in the house? Firefighter: he's looking for the owner of the home. Neighbor: he is right over there with the video camera. Turns out the owner did not think it was important to alert the fire department he was out of the house. Instead, he was just taking video of the whole event. The fire started because the owner had tried to smother his barbecue cooker flame with leftover wood from the siding that had been installed on his home. The owner did not realize it would burnt his whole house down. Years ago we had this call straight out of Caddyshack. Some guy had gotten tired of this gopher ruining his yard. Little did he know though he was facing the Sun Tzu of gophers. The homeowner, dwelling upon his experience from Vietnam, decided that the best way to deal with the gopher was to treat the situation like a VC tunnel. In lieu of a frag grenade, he poured a 5-gallon can of gasoline down the gopher hole, waited with a varmint gun, and lit it off. The ensuing explosion caused a small crater to form in his yard. I am still thoroughly impressed that there was a proper fuel-to-air ratio in the network of tunnels that allowed for such an explosion to happen. However, the gopher refused to surrender without a fight. The gopher ran out of the hole engulfed in flames, causing the guy's yard to catch on fire. The gopher sprinted into the guy's shed still on fire and burrowed into a void space in the wall, where he died. Like the martyr perk from Modern Warfare, his still flaming remains set the inside of the wall on fire as well as several flammables. In the end, the guy's backyard was ruined and about a quarter of his shed burned down, taking out a bunch of power tools and a zero-turn mower. He definitely would have saved a few $1,000s if he had hired an exterminator. This reminds me of my dad. He hated fire ants. Always had gasoline around to clean the grease, you know. Well, he would get bit by an ant and the fight was on. Gasoline fetched and poured onto the mow. ND. Promptly lit and the ensuing commentary delivered, "Diappin', I'll show the man's fire." This is my dad's story, not mine, but I've heard it so many times I think I can accurately tell it here. My dad was on the Boston Fire Department for a little over 35 years. For 13 of those years, he worked at a fire station in Dorchester. In Dorchester, there is a zoo. The Franklin Park Zoo. One morning in late September, they get a call to the Franklin Park Zoo for a young girl mauled by a gorilla. This is the sort of call they'd get all the time. Gorilla jumps at the glass, kid gets scared, parents panic and call 911. So they hop in the truck and ride on over. It's one of those kind of foggy early fall mornings as they walk into the zoo. A couple of the other firefighters start walking into the zoo as my dad notices a man sitting on a bench holding a little girl in his arms. Assuming this is what the call is for, he walks over to the man. The little girl has a scrape on her forehead and she's crying but is otherwise fine. The man looks like he just saw a ghost. So my dad asks the guy what's going on. The man just says little Joe is out. My dad says, what does that mean? The man just repeats little Joe is out. So my dad says, who the F is Little Joe? Little Joe is a 500 pounds adolescent male silverback gorilla. Loose in the streets of Boston. It's right about now that my dad realizes that he's not exactly qualified to handle a gorilla, but he doesn't know who to call, so he calls everyone. 2 minutes later the fire chief shows up, not knowing what the call was about yet, and jumps out of his car saying, Mark, is this about a FING gorilla?" My dad says, "Yeah, but how'd you hear that?" The chief says he's standing at the bus stop on Seaver Street. Now the SWAT team shows up, hats on backwards, M16s in hand, and my dad, being the smart as he is, looks at the sergeant and says, "Hey, I don't think this thing is armed." He caught a bit of flack for that later on. Animal control and the SWAT team worked together to take down Little Joe. It took 14 tranquilizer darts before he finally went unconscious. Little Joe is still alive and well at the Franklin Park Zoo. A motorist had a bad alternator and the car died while she was driving. The electric lock control stopped working. We were dispatched for a person trapped in a motor vehicle. On arrival, the advice was given to manually lift the lock knob. You can easily tell the ones who will not survive the first 24 hours of the zombie apocalypse. 2 I can recall, one specific. The specific one was a young girl around teenage years who decided those toddler swings with a seat you stick their legs through like a little basket so they can fall out was made for a teenage girl. She got stuck and lost blood flow to her legs. We had to cut her down and get her to a hospital to have it safely removed due to it basically becoming a tourniquet on both her legs. The other is general, but it's people who didn't wear a seatbelt and the people they killed as a result. You have less control of a vehicle when you're not being held in place, so those wrecks are more common as the first sign of trouble. Your butt moves in the seat and reduces your ability to control the vehicle. You also become a projectile. If you're lucky you only kill yourself. If you're not you wind up bouncing around and killing a passenger. Also the leading cause of partial ejections and re-entry to vehicles since nothing was holding them to the seats. So many times I could have just been there cutting someone out of a seat and them being barely beat up, but instead they had been scalped and died, or hit their kid or spouse or other family member or friend and killed them. One in particular I remember was a large man not wearing a seatbelt in an overturned truck. He woke up while we were working on him cutting the passenger side up to get down to him as the vehicle was on its side, driver side down. He kept asking us how his son was. At first we didn't get it. And we realized he was laying on his 15 to 16-year-old son, and due to the man's size we didn't see him. The son was wearing a seatbelt, but he died because his father smashed into him and smothered him to death while we worked rather than just wear a seatbelt extender so his seatbelt fit. Also don't lie to us about if you wore it. Your seatbelt won't fire the pretensioners if they are not engaged in the slot. They are designed that way. There is a circuit that is completed by the vest being clicked in place, which is also how your car knows your passengers are wearing a seatbelt or not and sets off that obnoxious alarm. There is also a sensor in the passenger front seat of most modern vehicles to detect the weight of a small person, which is why your sodas or pizzas at whatever set off the alarm. Just wear the damn seatbelt and don't lie. If you were wearing it I won't be able to pull tons of slack on it when I arrive. Guess what goes in the report is the determining factor your insurance sees as to if you should have your medical covered as a result of an accident? Yup. I don't know what they do with the information, but I have to write it in the report. When I was a volunteer, we had to carry a woman inside the house that passed out in her yard on a mattress after celebrating her weight loss success. She was about 400 pounds and all dead weight. Came in as a medical call, so only 2 people responded. In the end, it took about 5 of us to do it. I remember asking a firefighter about this once, and he said a guy who was effing a woman. Her husband came home, so he jumped out the second-story window buck naked and impaled himself through the upper leg on a fence paling. It was one of those fleur-de-lis ones, so it effed up his leg pretty badly. They had to cut the paling out of the fence and load him into an ambulance. I was a volunteer firefighter many years back. One summer, after a long period of no rain, 2 good old boys decide to have a few dozen beers and take their Jeep into a nearby field to go off-roading. Well, tilted 2 feet tall corn stalks that are bone dry wind up getting jammed up into the undercarriage, which, on a 90+ degree day, turns out to be hot enough to ignite a fire. The owner of the field sees the situation unfolding from their house and calls for fire and police. Given the proximity to my location, I go directly to the scene after hearing the page go out and see these 2 assholes trying to drive the Jeep faster and faster to put the fire out. Eventually, the engine gives out, but they won't leave the car. I physically had to reach in, burning my arms in the process, since I didn't respond to the station first to get my turnout gear, and pull them out. Somehow, they decided that remaining in the car would slow down the flames. And because they thought it was a good idea to continue driving a burning vehicle around a dry field, We now have a significant brush fire and have to call mutual aid from another county to help douse the fire. State police get involved. I have a nice trip to the hospital. And a-holes lose their Jeep and the remainder of their booze. Former firefighter EMT. Easily the dumbest person I encountered was a mother of 4 who decided it would be an awesome idea to get a Facebook/Instagram worthy picture of her kids, all under age 10, sitting in a rowboat. Mother untied it from the dock and thought she'd just pulled them back with the rope. That she forgot to hold on to. They floated a half-mile down the river before the 2 oldest boys managed to grab a branch hanging over the bank. It was really surreal to see 4 young kids, all in matching clothing, sitting in a boat waiting to be rescued. I have no clue what happened after, but they were physically fine, just scared, a little tired, but the mom was in full-blown panic mode and kept getting in our way. I hope she's making better choices now. I'm not the firefighter, but my brother's wife at the time was. There was this massive structure fire at a barn in town that drew out nearly every truck in the general area, like 3 towns worth of firefighters trying to get this thing under control. During all of this, there was some lady who continuously called 911 asking over and over again what's going on at the farm up the road. According to her, this woman would have to be a complete moron to not realize what was going on, as the fire could be seen for miles. Fast forward later into the night and one of the ambulances on scene suddenly leaves, obviously not normal for this sort of situation, but there isn't much time to question it. Fast forward still, and as things are finally starting to calm down and are under control, one of the volunteers on the original ambulance comes over in his own car and shuffles sheepishly over to her and the chief of their department. He tells them that there is a woman a little ways down the road who called the ambulance, hence why they left, and requires a lift assist, but absolutely refuses to let the EMTs do it. No, it has to be a firefighter. My brother's wife, seeing that the other departments have things under control, goes with the man to see what's up. Apparently, it was the same woman who had called 911 over and over again, and when they arrive, she is laying on the floor absolutely wailing. EMTs say they can't find anything wrong from what they've been able to do, but with her requested firefighter, they are finally able to get this woman up. They start asking her what happened, hoping she might be more willing to share with my brother's wife there, and she says, "I was just feeling a little ignored. I figured this would get your attention." Grown woman just laid herself on the floor, called for help, insisted on a firefighter when there was no need, all because the barn fire was getting way more attention than she was, and the 911 operators wouldn't give her the gossip about what was going on. I know she got in major trouble for abusing 911, but from what I hear from the people on both fire and ambulance, she has made a habit of calling for help whenever she feels she's not getting enough attention. I was the dumb call. My cat got her paw stuck under the dishwasher, and was screaming bloody murder. I couldn't move her paw and I couldn't lift the machine, so I sat with her while my husband called the fire department. She chewed right through one of my favorite blankets in her stress. Firefighters arrive, not in full suits but heavy boots and pants. Soon as they came around the corner to the kitchen, our cat miraculously was able to free her paw and take off to hide in the bathroom. The guys seemed confused, but at least it was easy. We thanked them profusely for being scary enough to free our cat, who had 0 physical damage, not even a broken claw. I guess she'd hooked her claws on something and didn't want to let it go for love or money. Obligatory, not a fireman, but they were most definitely involved. I used to work in a NYC public grammar school over the summers to pay for college back in the 90s. One of the full-time employees was a nice guy but stupid. And I don't mean he was slow or anything, he just did dumb shit because he was careless. One time he loaded up a trailer with like 25 gallons of gas and was driving it back through the main school parking lot. He didn't realize that container cracked open and spilled all 25 gallons in the parking lot. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he thought the best way to get rid of the evidence was to set the gas on fire. He didn't realize that burning gas gives off a lot of black smoke, and a gigantic cloud of black smoke coming from a school generally attracts a lot of attention from first responders. Panicking, he tries to put the flaming lake of gas out by driving over it with his car. The fire department gets there, screaming at him to stop driving his car through flaming gasoline. They finally get the fire out and just screamed at this guy for like 25 minutes. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Oh wow, you made it to the end. Like and subscribe for more content like this. Also leave a comment down below letting me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching.